On this edition of Native Report, we attend a special flag raising ceremony celebrating the coming together of two communities.
We then meet Wisconsin's former Poet Laureate and author Kim Blaeser.
And we attend a formal land acknowledgement by the University of Minnesota Duluth.
We also learn what we can do to lead healthier lives and hear from our elders on this edition of Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation, the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, and the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Rita Aspinwall. Thanks for tuning in.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. A flag raising ceremony in the City of Duluth Mayor's reception room symbolizes the reconciliation between the city and the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. It serves as a reminder that communities that work together thrive together.
It is a special afternoon in the reception room of Duluth Mayor Emily Larson as a flag song by the Cedar Creek Singers echoes throughout City Hall. The singing and drumming honors the permanent installation of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa's flag next to that of the City of Duluth's.
I think one of the big things is we never had that really working relationship with the City of Duluth. It was on and off. And I think of the last mayor that we had, Mayor Ness, nothing against him, but there wasn't a working relationship between Mayor Ness and Fond du Lac. And so when the election came with the new mayor, the idea was to sit down with the mayor, and we had a very, very good conversation to talk to one another and say, what are the goals of Fond du Lac or what are the goals of Duluth? The onset of the first initial meeting with the mayor was the point of having a flag. And she didn't disagree with that. She said, that's a great idea.
The Anishinaabe peoples and other tribal nations, prominently including our Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. And I want to pay my respects to our ancestors before us and our elders that are with us today. This was really a natural evolution of the relationship that Fond du Lac and the City of Duluth have sought to rebuild in the last few years. The gift, truly a gift from the sovereign nation Fond du Lac of a flag, really is the culmination of the time and investment I feel we have put in one another to create and recreate a really authentic relationship that is unlocking some of the strife of the past and being really honest about our history, and then also seeking to forge a more open relationship moving forward. I have really sought to do things intentionally different in my role as mayor in a way that feels authentic to myself, which is about kind of stepping into space that maybe, administrations and RBCs hadn't gone before, and being open to the possibility that there is a relationship that can be formed on, accepting responsibility and also friendship.
The band owns and operates a casino in downtown Duluth, and the history of the split between the two governments was over a profit-sharing agreement that was declared illegal under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. But with the flag, a symbol of reconciliation, being placed in City Hall, both communities are committed to working with each other rather than against one another.
To me, it feels very, very good that there's a whole big starting point. That one, most importantly, that we're recognized as who we are as a people located just 20 miles west of here, that this is our original home. That bay was the original home of Fond du Lac. And to get that back to that point where we can sit down and have true dialogue and to talk with one another and see what's best for our community, what's best for the City of Duluth, and to say what resources do you have, what resources do we have to make this work as a collective principle.
What can be done together is more powerful than what can be done alone, and really working especially hard to reach out and hear people's voices who have felt marginalized and have let me know that they didn't feel a part of the city or didn't feel that their voice, their experience, their story was reflected in our policies or our staffing or our programs. And so that's an evolutionary process. I think having a drum present now several times in the course of my term is an indicator that the comfort level is starting to change for people. And we want people to come into this building with their full expression of who they are, because that's what a beautiful, vibrant community looks like.
Chairman Dupe and Mayor Larson do meet on a quarterly basis, and both are looking toward the future as this partnership evolves.
This is, one more step in moving forward, hopefully in a more cooperative fashion between the city and the nation of Fond du Lac. And as we talked about, we meet quarterly to talk about different issues, different projects. We talk a lot about downtown, different investments that Fond du Lac is making, and then the health concerns, mental health, chemical health, housing, all the things that we have in common, that when we talk together, we can create better solutions. It's like a step on a map that we're writing as we go. And so I'm open to what comes next.
Sometimes we play king of the hill. Sometimes we protect borders, and that's understandable because that's what we've been doing for a very, very long time. But I think there's a point in time to look at one another and say, what can we offer you? What can you offer us? This is the starting of it. But we look at every other aspect about it: employment, residential, the living areas where people live, the indigenous community, and not just the indigenous community, but all communities in the city of Duluth. So I think this was the perfect and ample time. I don't know if it was because who sits here. I think over a process of time it would have happened. But the sooner the better, and we move forward with it now and take it to where best we can to help our people.
Cataracts are clouding of the intraocular lens of your eye. Intraocular means inside the eye, and the lens is right behind the pupil of your eye. This lens is normally crystal clear, but over time and with some injuries, the lens loses clarity and vision becomes like looking through a foggy window. This usually happens slowly, and people don't realize how much vision they have lost. Reading can be more difficult, driving can be affected, especially at night, and seeing small things becomes more difficult. The intraocular lens is like the lens in a magnifying glass, and it focuses the light coming through your pupil onto the retina. The retina is a screen in the back of your eye made of nerve cells, and it sends a signal to the brain that is interpreted as vision. All parts of this system need to be working properly for us to see clearly. Stronger glasses and brighter lights can help for a while, but eventually cataracts will interfere with vision. If this affects your activities, you might need cataract surgery. Cataract surgery has been around for a long time and is a very safe and effective procedure. Cataracts generally develop in both eyes, but not always evenly, and one eye might have a more advanced cataract than the other. There are different types of cataracts, and these can affect the center of the lens, the outside edges of the lens, or the capsule around the lens. Some chronic illnesses such as diabetes, high blood pressure, prolonged use of corticosteroids, excessive alcohol, and even overexposure to sunlight can make people more prone to cataracts. Sometimes people can be born with cataracts or develop them at a young age or get them due to eye injuries, but mostly they are caused by age. What about non-traditional tobacco use? The answer, of course, is yes. Smoking is a risk factor for cataracts. Prevention of cataracts means addressing the risk factors you can address. Good diabetes control, weight loss, keeping blood pressure under control, smoking cessation, and cutting back on alcohol will all help. A healthy diet, wearing sunglasses, and having regular eye exams are important. Cataracts are diagnosed during a complete eye exam with vision testing. Once you get to the point stronger glasses don't help and your vision is affecting everyday life, surgery is the next step. This consists of removing the clouded lens and replacing it with a clear artificial lens, and this will be a permanent part of the eye. This is done under a local anesthetic, and you are usually awake during the procedure. This is generally accepted as a low-risk procedure, although any procedure carries risks. You'll have some discomfort for a few days, and complete healing happens within 8 weeks. If you need both cataracts done, the other eye is done after the first has completely healed. Cataracts can severely limit people over time, and cataract surgery is a real blessing for someone with advanced cataracts. Speaking of blessings, remember to call an elder. They've been waiting for your call. I'm Dr. Arnie Vinio, and this is Health Matters.
Author and poet Kim Blaeser believes that one's love for stories and poetry is a gift. She was raised in a house full of storytellers back on her home reservation of the White Earth Nation in Minnesota. Kim is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she teaches creative writing and Native American literature. She was selected to serve as Wisconsin's Poet Laureate from 2015 to 2016.
"365 jingles in rows upon my dress, turned by the hands of one who deserted, escaped a mandated pipestone education."
If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the jingles as author and poet Kimberly Blaeser reads her poem, Equanime, Dancing Resistance. Kim, a former Poet Laureate for the state of Wisconsin, was reading from her books of poetry at the Dr. Robert Powless Cultural Center for an evening of Indigenous poetry.
I grew up in a large family at White Earth, and it was filled with amazing storytellers, right? So because I was small, quiet, and didn't bother anyone, I could sneak in and I could just listen, so I could absorb everything, right? So I feel like in some ways that a love of story is a gift we're given. So I feel like I came to this love of story and poetry and the sound of language, and I came to it pretty honestly. A lot of times in the Minnesota winter, what your entertainment is a lot of play, verbal play, stories and songs. So I feel like that kind of oral just engagement all the time is something that just starts to set up house in you. It resides in you.
Joining Kimberly for the evening were Linda Lagarde Grover, Babette Sandman, and Rocky Makes Room for Them. Each shared their poetry and stories with the audience. Kimberly wasn't always one to share her poetry, but that changed after she was asked to read for the very first time in public.
I always had story. And I was a graduate student at Notre Dame, and Winona LaDuke, who's also from White Earth, she was just doing some fundraising for the White Earth Land Recovery Project. So we were traveling around, and she invited me to go with, and it was the very first time I ever read my poems in public. And someone in the audience had a journal, and they wanted me to send some, and so it just sort of happened, right? And then once you get kind of in that network, it just continues to feed. Someone invites you to do this, and you get connected with that person, and so it's like a community of poets and storytellers. I always quote Audre Lorde, who said poetry is not a luxury. And in the way that I think of it, poetry is an act of attention. So it asks us to look again and look more closely at things in the world, right? And I say it's a gesture. So it's like, look over there and asking us to re-examine things. And if we see and then re-see a little deeper, right, I feel like that is something that can help us come to change, right? But I also talk about, especially Indigenous literature, as being affective and effective. So it wants to be beautiful as language, as performance, but it wants to do something in the world. So some people feel like poetry should be poetry for its own sake, art for art's sake. But I feel like it has a role to play, that it has work to do in the world. And so that's how I employ it. But what I liked about today was it's so much variety, right? So everybody clearly had a different style.
Kimberly has authored 4 books of poetry, an academic book-length study of Gerald Visner, and edited 2 volumes of short fiction and poetry. She served as Wisconsin's Poet Laureate for 2015 to 2016, a distinction she holds with high esteem.
It was actually a really amazing honor. And it was honestly so much fun. Like, I love hearing people's stories, I love connecting with people, and it gave me sort of this reason to go to all the far corners of Wisconsin and find these little communities of writers that you didn't even know existed. Like, you know, there's 10 people in some little town and they're doing a crazy, amazing stuff, right? So it gave me an opportunity to, that's how I first went into the prison, it's how I've done a lot of other things. It opened doors for me to connect up with different writers. And, you know, in schools and libraries and retirement homes and on lake shores and in just all kinds of strange places. It was wonderful to be able to bring poetry. And so I would have these public recitation events, and I had a map created where people would recite a poem by heart, not their own, but somebody else's, right? Tell why it was important, recite it, be videotaped, and then they would go up on the map, like from wherever they were, where there was their home. And so anyone can go on and click on that and listen to them reciting. There's something about having poetry inside. Like, you could go to it at any moment. Like, it inhabits you. You kind of inhabit the language more once you've memorized it, right? And so I feel like it's a bank. It's a bank of ideas and images that we can bring to use in our life. The biggest piece of advice I would give to a young writer is to read. Because, you know, you need to see, hear, read what other writers who are accomplished. You have to become acquainted with that. You have to have models, right? And so I think that that's the biggest thing. Is just to immerse yourself in poetry or fiction or whatever is your genre, right?
But when we sing of might, this is the part. The part where my jailed brown uncles, my shackled cousins, angel their way in, where children fostered and lost reappear. I dress in their stories, patterned and purple as night. I dress in old songs of prison trains and men covering their eyes to sleep. Songs of women on one side of a sliding panel, of lives shattered, but mosaicked by might. The angles of survival, a many-cornered wholeness.
I was born on the res also in the old Indian hospital. We lived on Jarvie Road. It was my grandmother's house, and she had another house up towards the church. And I was old enough to walk, the things that I can remember, so I was about maybe 3, and I could walk up to see my grandma through the woods. Thought nothing of it. And those probably were the best years of my life. Then as we grew older, things were not that good. We moved up to Brookston. I was still pretty young, maybe 4, and my folks built that tar paper shack. It wasn't one room, it was probably one big area with a partition for a bedroom. No water, outdoor toilet. You know, it's strange. Everybody was poor, but we didn't know it.
Land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects the Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. Join us now as we attend a land acknowledgement event held by the University of Minnesota Duluth.
An afternoon campus event at the University of Minnesota Duluth was the first of its kind across the University of Minnesota system. UMD is the very first campus to formally adopt a land acknowledgement, recognizing its location on traditional and ancestral American Indian land.
I have a pleasure of welcoming you to this event, and I have the honor of attending this event, which is long overdue. It's my honor as Chancellor of the University of Minnesota Duluth to join our Native American students, faculty, staff, tribal members, and community members as we celebrate the UMD Land Acknowledgement. So we are here this afternoon to have a formal presentation and introduction of the UMD Land Acknowledgement to the general public. This was an acknowledgement that was created last spring and summer, initiated by the American Indian Studies Department here at UMD, also vetted through the Minnesota Tribal Affairs Council, and also eventually officially approved by me as Chancellor. I wanted to have an officially approved statement for UMD. I thought this was critically important for us to have this land acknowledgement. It really celebrates our heritage and the things that we acknowledge and owe to the Native Americans who were on this land long before we were. We are fortunate to have both undergraduate and graduate programs that focus on many American Indian issues, particularly in terms of tribal administration and governance. We do have very innovative programs at both the master's and bachelor's level in those areas. We also have a Tribal Sovereignty Institute, which really focuses on what it means to be sovereign nations and helps all people understand what the importance of tribal sovereignty.
UMD students can also access the American Indian Learning Resource Center, a repository of informational material on campus. A presentation by one of the American Indian Studies professors was also part of the afternoon event.
I'm here today to participate in this land acknowledgement event to provide some of my perspective on what the 1854 treaty means, what it means especially to non-Indian folks. My view is that it's only because of the 1854 treaty that the United States has jurisdiction here in Northeast Minnesota, that non-Indian folks can be in this region. And we exercise those rights all the time, right, in our daily lives. And so I want to illuminate that for folks, and I also want to emphasize that doing so comes with a lot of obligations, right? If we're going to enjoy the treaty rights that we gain through that arrangement, we need to make sure that we're minding the obligations that we take on to work with tribal nations in a good way, to protect and preserve the resources they have reserved through the treaty. Those are significant obligations, but we get significant rights, so we need to make sure to pay attention to that and honor those.
The land is important to Native people because it is our source of spirituality. Acknowledging the land, at least to me, means that we recognize those who came before us, and in recognizing those who came before us, we know our role in this life for those who have yet to come. So in acknowledging the land, it kind of helps us find our place in the world.
Attendees also heard from artist Miri Villiard, who painted murals on the campus, the most recent one outside the campus bus hub, honoring the land acknowledgement.
I'm super excited to be here and to have been asked to work on the murals that you guys see kind of out front in Kirby and then outside the Multicultural Center. The mural that is outside of the Multicultural Center is kind of an illustration of how the Anishinaabe actually got here, our migration story of basically following the Migas shell, which is the big shell that you see pictured, to the place where food grew on water, which is wild rice, which is also depicted in the image. And then the mural that's outside in front of Kirby is a turtle. The turtle has 13 major pieces of its shell on its back. And the Anishinaabe look at that as sort of almost like a representation of how we look at our calendar. So 13 moons, and there's 28 pieces around the edges, and that's the 28 days in each moon. And I just thought that was a good reflection of just time. You spend a lot of time in school.
And then it was time to formally read the land acknowledgement.
We collectively acknowledge that the University of Minnesota Duluth is located on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous people. The university resides on land that was cared for and called home by the Ojibwe people, before them the Dakota and the Northern Cheyenne people, and other Native peoples from time immemorial. Ceded by the Ojibwe in an 1854 treaty, this land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards, the Native nations and peoples of this region. We recognize and continually support and advocate for the sovereignty of the Native nations in this territory and beyond. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm tribal sovereignty and will work to hold the University of Minnesota Duluth accountable to the American Indian peoples and nations. Woohoo! How cool!
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org, on Facebook, and on YouTube.
Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors across Indian country. I'm Rita Aspinwall.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. Join us next time for Native Report.
Rita Aspinwall is an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and is an ICWA social worker with Fond du Lac Social Services. Ernie Stevens is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and is a film and television producer. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation, the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, and the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community.